If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you. Hello Internet, we're back and we're glad to say we've got a member of 3-2 Battalion here with us. It's a former major. He's a man who was quite famous inside their ranks. We know him as Major Heyns. Sir, very welcome here. I'm really grateful for your time. I believe we will have a couple of episodes. This is the first one where we're going to ask you, where do you come from? Who are you? But I suppose I first have to ask you, where did you get that name from, Heyns?
Yeah, I've got actually two stories about it. And the one is, there's always a story about what's the truth and what's the lie. But when I do team building, I normally tell the people that my name is Buttons because it's a specific drug. And I used to use this drug when I was still at school. But the real story is actually that my older sister is just a little bit older than I am. And when she started talking, she couldn't say Boetie, so she said Butty. Eventually Butty turned into Buttons when I became a little bit bigger and older, but now some of my family still call me Butty, but it's Buttons. So that's actually where the story comes from.
Well, that's excellent, because I know you were born in Windhoek, I think, but you grew up in Shumep. Now, perhaps you will have to explain to people where in the world is Shumep. I know the place well. Fantastic people there. But tell us, you're a Namibian. You're actually from Zuidwest.
Yeah, I was born in Windhoek in 1959, so that's also a few years ago. I cannot remember a lot about Windhoek. My father and mother were normal middle-class people. My mother was in the bank and my father was in the retail business. So we moved a few times from town to town as he got promoted, etc., etc. So my second town that I can start when I started remembering was Oudtshoorn. Now Oudtshoorn is in the middle north of Namibia. It's a very nice town. Today it's also the headquarters or the capital of the middle north. But the town actually developed because of support to farmers, because it's a big farming community, cattle farms, and there are also mealie farms. Nowadays it's lots of farms, but also obviously mining, lots of mining there. I can remember vividly that growing up there, we had like a free time. It was actually a pleasure to be a child in Namibia those days. My father traveled a lot. It was a small community, and I clearly remember the days my father had a friend who had a farm outside Oudtshoorn, and his wife was actually my teacher. But like I said, the small community, my father used to take me out of school on Fridays, and we go to the farm to work the cattle, also to ride horse a little bit, and then we'll wait for the mothers to come back on a Saturday afternoon after school or after work actually. So it was a very free time for children. Yeah, not long after that, we actually moved to Shumep, and that's where I started growing up and started remembering being a young boy and later a little bit older in high school. Now Shumep is a very, very luscious area. It's a little bit more north of Oudtshoorn, and it actually started as a mining town. The Bushmen used to copper there, and they used to sell it to the Wambus, and the Wambus then made copper armbands and feet bands and wristbands out of that. And the Bushmen actually called it it means to dig a hole that collapses again. And today that area is called Kupferquelle, where they originally started mining. And today it's a very smart lodge plus a swimming pool, etc. And then as the copper became more known, Europeans moved into Tsumeb, and the Americans started a mine there, TCL, and it became a very big town and a very sort of rich town in those days. As a child, it was actually very nice to grow up there, because you go to school, you come back, you go and play or do sport, and all you have to do is you have to be back at 7 o'clock at night. There was no telephones. And I have 3 sisters, so I used to get a few hidings because everybody had to be back at the house at 7 o'clock at night. And it was a community of Afrikaans, English, and German. Most of my friends were German. And they had sort of a different upbringing than the Boere, let me say, the Afrikaners or the English. And we used to get in trouble a lot, me and my German friends, for doing things that was acceptable to their parents, obviously, but not to mine. And there's a few stories about that. But I can remember growing up there that eventually in the early 70s, it became prevalent that the situation is not normal, and the security situation started to deteriorate a little bit. Not a lot, but it started. I can remember that we had a lot of children from the Wambuland, Oshikati and Dangwa, that used to go to school with us in Tsumeb, and later on they were being escorted by military to come to school in the on weekends after they've been out to their parents. So that was the beginning of the situation there in the north that that made one realize that something is happening here. My parents were also friends with Mr. Oomdani and Tannie Pompey van der Westhuizen. Now they had a farm outside Tsumeb, and later years Oomdani became a lieutenant in the commandos and Tannie Pompey became a sergeant, and she was known as the radio lady, and she monitored all these radio channels and then gave the information through to the military. And unfortunately, many years later, some years later, the Oomdani himself and his son-in-law were ambushed, and some of the bushmen that they trained were ambushed in a rattle and shot out, and they unfortunately died. So Etosha Commando, which was under Commandant Paul Creer, was quite a prominent commando. Now in the early days when this started off, my father used to travel a lot to Wambuland, and we used to go with, if we could, if it was holidays. But later on, we couldn't go with anymore because my father has to take somebody else with him, like a tochrijder. And he also had his commando rifle, the FN rifle, with him. So you could see that it was, security was clamping down a little bit more. And then obviously with the war started with SWAPO in 1976. It became more serious, 74, 75. So it was also a rich town. Those days we had wonderful amenities. We had the TCL recreational club. where we had an Olympic-sized swimming pool, we had squash, we had golf, we had kegel, like a kegel barn. So the area and the school were quite good in sport, because we had all the facilities. Nowadays, it's a little bit dilapidated, but I was there the other day, and some German gentleman bought the place now, and he's going to sort of revamp it to its previous glory. Now, after Tsumeb, my father moved to Walvis Bay. He got promoted in his business, and my mother also, and she went to Walvis Bay to the bank. And myself and my sister stayed behind. We had a flat behind our house so that we could stay there for another year to finish that year. And yeah, one of the stories that some of my friends do know is that my father used to retail in cigarettes and alcohol. So in this flat, he had quite a sort of a stash of miniature alcohol bottles that he used to give away for examples of branding, and also cigarettes. So we went on an athletics camp to Oudtshoorn one weekend, the whole school. And I don't know why I had this idea, but I slipped out of the hostel, went to the flat, and packed a whole talk bag full of these small miniatures, plus a carton or what of cigarettes. So got to the bus and told some of my friends, we were sitting at the back, that I've got this now, maybe we can use it afterwards, after we've won the athletics. And some of them said, no, let's have one or two now, and it's not going to make a big difference because there's still a few hours before we start competing. Eventually, it went from good to real bad. By the time we had to compete in Oudtshoorn, half of the athletes were either sleeping in the stables or were half drunk, and obviously it wasn't a real success for us. I mean, we had a lot of champions in our school, and they didn't even make. Some of them came last, some of them didn't even feature. So obviously that was a good and a sort of a real no-no. And what followed after that, when we got back to school on Monday, was 4 or 5 weeks of turmoil. Obviously they knew that myself and a friend of mine were the instigators of this, but they didn't talk to us. They actually only spoke to other children. And by closer by time, I knew that by the time it's my chance to get there, I'm going to be, they're either going to kill me but I'm not going to survive this. In any case, after a few weeks, now I've lost a few kilograms. By then, I was called into the principal's office, and now my friend just came out of there, and he had 12 with a rotam. So I knew I'm going to probably get some more. But when I got there, there was the chief of police was there, the headmaster, the deputy headmaster, also the inspector of schools. So, and when I sat down, they actually said to me, "But welcome, you want to drink something?" "No, thank you." I mean, I was nervous. "You want to smoke something maybe?" I said, "No, thank you." So the law was then, I think, that you couldn't give somebody more than 12 shots with a rotam. So the chief of police then said, "But he will then take it on him, and I will get 2 sessions from the police, 6 on the one week and 6 on the other week. And that's going to be done by Mr. Jumbo, which is a big policeman." And my father was quite well known in the community. By the time I got to the police station, I told Jumbo that, "You know who my father is, and if you hurt me, he's probably going to hurt you." So, but he gave it his all. And after a week, I had to go for another 6. But that wasn't the end of it. So they also wrote a letter to my mother and father, but they are now in Walvis Bay. I'm still in Chumeb. So I phoned my mother and I told my mother that there's a letter being sent to him, to my father, and she must try and get hold of this letter and forge his signature and send it back, which he then did. And so I was very lucky not to get expelled, but I had a serious curfew on me. And I only told my father when I was at university. So many years later, I only told him the story because I knew I was going to get another ID. But in any case, those were the things that you could still do as a youngster at school in Namibia. And my father was also the first Afrikaans carnival prince, which is quite a big thing to become here in Namibia. Oktoberfest, carnival is big here. So that's why the people probably also call us Heyns instead of Heyns, but yeah, let's let that be as it is. So after Chumeb, we moved to Walvis Bay, and that's where I finished my school in 76. And a year or two before that, when you turn 16, you get your call-up papers. And then they called me up to the medics, and I thought, yeah, this is nice. The second year, they also called me up to the medics, and that's where I decided that maybe my fate will lie in to become a doctor. And so I started working in hospitals at emergency, first cleaning up, and later on also putting in stitches and that type of thing. But when it came to study time, when we finished school, I applied for medicine, but my marks were not good enough. So I got eventually to the University of Pretoria, where I got allowed to study B-Medski for 1 year, and then with the aim of getting higher marks in mathematics, and then you can do your second year just anatomy, and then when you actually your third year at university, you only first year medicine. So what actually happened then is I got a rewrite for my mathematics after year 1. And so year 2, I only did mathematics after hours. So I got bored. And I spoke to somebody there that said, but they're studying physical education. So I thought, okay, I'll do physical education in the day, do my mathematics in the evening, and then at least I'm doing something. But I'm quite good at sport, and I so enjoyed the physical education that I actually continued with that, because my second year I also got a rewrite for mathematics, so I knew this is going to be a continuous story. I'm not going to make mathematics, so then I studied physical education. And I did psychology and biomechanics as subjects. So I finished my my university, and then applied to study sports science with Tim Noakes. It was the first year that I actually did sports science in 1981. And I got accepted myself and another Springbok gymnast, Kathy Myberg. So I was quite chuffed with that, and I again wrote to get exemption, and which they then actually denied. So, and my next call-up papers was actually to then report at infantry school in 1981 as a teacher, but I didn't study teaching, so I tried again, but to no avail. And so I think it was the 1st or 2nd January, I had to get on the train in Cape Town and got to Beaufort West. And then they loaded us on Bedfords and drove us to Oudtshoorn. Obviously, immediately at arriving in Oudtshoorn, I tried my best to get to see the officer commanding and tell him that, listen, you've got it all wrong here. I have to go back to university. It's a chance in a lifetime that you're now ruining. I'm not a teacher, so I don't want to be at infantry school. I'm not at all chuffed with this whole idea, which didn't go well with the commanding officer. And I was forthright sent back to the barracks and say, this is what you're doing. But I reapplied. I actually irritated them to pieces to get out of there. But we had to continue actually until such time as I get exemption. And I thought, well, I'm here now. And I was dealt into platoon number 1, which is from Bravo Company, all the teachers. And in my platoon was lots of sportsmen. Flippy van der Merwe, the rugby player. Herman van Heerden was also a lock for Natal those days. A Saudi guy that used to play fly off. We had guys like Alet Kisser, who's a very good runner. And so we started off, and I was quite fit. I enjoyed the physical challenges. But we weren't there for a long time. I think it was about 25 January, yes, in 1981. We were all scrambled together and said, we have to pack up. We're going to go to Laingsburg, which was the Laingsburg flood. So we were the only company already in infantry school, because the rest of those other companies come from the SAI units 3 months after basics. Then they only get to Oudtshoorn. So Bravo Company was the only company in Oudtshoorn, except obviously for those people, the other companies that were now ready to deploy to the border to Oshivela. So they sent us to Laingsburg, plus I think one or two other companies in that they took away, or they didn't then go to Oshivela. They were derailed and sent to Laingsburg. We arrived there. It was a terrible sight to see. I remember the military actually, the only place in Laingsburg that wasn't flooded was the rugby field on the top of a hill, and then the fuel station and a little small shopping center that was like uphill. The rest was totally flooded. And also I remember when we started clearing off and clearing out the town, you couldn't believe the height of what water can actually do, and the levels that the water actually rose, because we started cleaning the church and the high school, and the mud was up to the 2nd floor of the school. So it was a serious flood. I mean, I think about 104 people died and only 72 or so were found. So our job was there. The military cooked, and people had their lunches and at the rugby field. And eventually I got dealt into an area with the Red Cross where people could bring all their donations, food and blankets and whatever you could find, because everything was ruined. There was I think there was about 20 houses that weren't totally ruined or flooded. Now, we were also given instructions not to become emotional with the people, because everybody has a specific plight at that stage. And it was terrible, actually, because I actually got into a situation where one gentleman came to me and he said he lost his wife and I think 3 or 4 children. And his house was full of mud up to the level of the roof. And if it's possible that we can maybe dig a hole in there, and he knows where his wife's sideboard is, or not actually the sideboard, in his wife's room or in their room, there was the table that the women normally make up, do their makeup and stuff. And he knows that her ring is in one of those drawers. So what can you do? I mean, really, we tried to tell him that it's impossible, we're not allowed to do it, but eventually I got a few guys together and we actually did it. And the joy on that man's face was unbelievable. So I don't know how long we stayed there, but I think it was a few weeks, and then we went back to infantry school and started with our normal training again. And by then, I think about 3 months later, I got called into the OC's office and said, okay, but now they know they've made a mistake. I can go back to university now. Now that was already March, April. So I said, well, it's actually too late now because that course started in January and it's now April. So I'll just continue and finish my year, and then that's it. So that's what I then did. I played golf, so I was in the sports platoon, and so it wasn't too bad. I could go out on Wednesdays and also on Saturdays, and sometimes we actually went further to other towns, and there were a lot of the military personnel, the officers and NCOs that also played golf. So it was actually a nice way to get out of camp twice a week. Also, another funny story that happened there is Flippy van der Merwe was then a very definite choice for the Springboks. And what happened is when Dani Craven phoned the colonel, I think, what was his name? Swarthand, called Swarthand, and told him that he's got a Flippy van der Merwe there, and we better make sure that he's fit, because they want to use him for the SA Platteland team to tour to Argentina later in that year. So it was my job then to get Flippy fit. And so myself and a few other guys drilled Flippy. I think, if I remember correctly, his first 2.4 was something like 16 minutes. And that's only with tackies and water bottle and rifle. So, which is not a quick time. But I think eventually he did it in something like 12 minutes, and he was fit, really fit. So much so that they chose him for that team, and he went to Argentina, played great rugby, came back. He was chosen for the Springboks, and well, the rest is history for Flippy. He was a big man, but yeah, he was quite mobile when he was in infantry school. Other stories from infantry school. It was an interesting time. There's obviously a lot of discipline there. My focus point was only to finish this year and then get out of there as soon as possible. So we had another opportunity where we were asked if we want to join the mortars to do a special course, and we decided to do mortars. So it was a few of our people in Bravo company that were graduated, plus a few from the other companies, non-graduated guys. But it was actually very nice because by then it was closer to the end of the year, and we finished our most of our training. So this is now specialized training as an infanteer and as a mortarist. And yeah, it was sort of enjoyable, because I think also because you are graduated and you're not taking things too serious, and your corporals and sergeants are 18 and 19 years old, and some of our guys already had honors and master's degrees. So it was a little bit more laissez-faire and not as focused as the young ones, or maybe not so scared. So what also happened is closer to the end of the year, we had a colonel's inspection on a Saturday, and as it normally turns out, when the staff come back from Oudtshoorn town, they've been to the Spur or one of the restaurants and they've had a few drinks. It's normally their playtime to come and rearrange your bungalow now. At 2 o'clock in the morning, your bungalow is exi perfectie. It's now in ship-shape condition. And you're ready for the inspection the next morning. So this corporal and sergeant came in. They were fairly inebriated, sloshed actually. They were actually sloshed. So what they did is they took a few buckets of sand and threw it with water into the hall and into the rooms. And I think it was a decide. I mean, everybody decided then just this is not happening. I mean, we close to the end of the year, and this is now the way you want to treat us. So we all walked out of the bungalow and stood in front of the bungalow. And the next time, the corporal and sergeant came out there and put us in a squad there and started threatening us now that we better go back and clean this bungalow because tomorrow is officers' inspection. So we said, well, quite aware of it actually, because we were ready for them until such time as you rocked up. So we just didn't agree. So we said, we're not going to go back and we're not going to clean it. And this is it. So the one corporal, I can't remember his name now, small as red hat, sort of an aggro type of person, started confronting Herman van Heerden and told him that if he doesn't comply, they're going to send him to RTU him or send him to the most unwanted base. And he was married at that stage. And then eventually he will probably also lose your wife, but he didn't put it in that words. He was more harsh than that. So Herman had enough of it, grabbed him by the throat, and he was dangling. Now, Herman was a big guy, he was like 6'7" or 8. So this corporal was dangling there with Herman, his hands around his throat, and just threw him away. And then we charged the loot, and then the loot ran away. So he hid into in one of these bins, these plastic bins. So we started searching for him. So we're running the whole infantry school base, and we're trying to find the corporal and the loot now. We didn't find them, so we came back to the bungalow. We didn't clean up the bungalow. And the next morning, obviously, the colonel was there, plus the loot and the sergeant and the corporal, and he wanted to know what's going on here. And we told him. So, and actually we took it a little bit further. We decided we want an audience with the commanding officer, and we told him this is not the way it's going to happen. We are not going to the border with these two people. So you must get rid of them, give us somebody else, and then we'll go to the border with him. I think it was quite, let's say, quite forward of us to do that, but he understood. I mean, that it just shows you the quality of an officer of that type of institute. So they didn't. They took these two guys away. They gave us another loot, a one-pip loot, a 19-year-old gentleman, plus a new sergeant. So, okay, off we go to Oshivelo. And that's now the training area where you do 1 month training, and then you deploy into a Wambeland and do your specific training, point insurgency training. And then you deploy a little bit, and then you go back to infantry school. So we were dealt into the mortar section. So our task was to look after a specific base there, and I was made a section leader. Well, I mean, that's like a temporary one-stripe guy, but I mean, this is now serious responsibilities that's put on you. So one of my friends, that was with me in this platoon. I had to do a guard duty the specific Saturday afternoon. But he had a friend that also studied with us. That's already an officer in Oudtshoorn, and he worked there in the ops room. So he was already a trooper blood, and we were then still troops. So this, I won't mention my friend's name, but he came to me the Saturday and he said he wants to go and visit his friend. Is it okay? I said, fine, it's fine. You can ask the loot. And I asked the loot, he said, it's fine, you can go. And went to visit his friend, but he had to be back by 6 because he had guard duty to do. He never arrived. And the next day, he wasn't there either. But the Sunday afternoon, he came back. And he told me that he's in big trouble. I said, well, obviously you're in big trouble. You weren't here for 2 sessions of guard duty. No, he said, that's nothing. I'm in bigger trouble. I said, what? So he said, when he didn't make it for Saturday evening, he thought he might as well stay over, which I then did. I had a party with the officer in his house or in his bungalow. And the next morning, they were going to go for lunch. So his friend suggested, but take my pips, 2 pips, I'll put on 2 pips. And then we go to the officers' mess and we go and eat there, which they then did. And while ordering some drinks at the bar, our lieutenant, the guy that's actually now our platoon commander, who is a 1-pip loot, was introduced to this friend of mine by the other officer. Obviously, he said, but I know this man. He's one of my troops. But obviously, he was young. He didn't want to make a scene. So he left it at that. And they had their lunch. And obviously now, the next day when he arrived back, he was on orders. And this was a little bit of difficulty for him. And yeah, so eventually, nothing more serious happened at deployment. So we moved back to infantry school. Now, this is a time where they have to decide now whether you're going to become a CEO or a lance corporal, a candidate officer or a lance corporal. Now, this friend of mine was nominated to be the candidate officer of the year and to receive the sable as the best student in infantry school for that year. But this blotch that he had in Oudtshoorn obviously interfered with that. So I remember we were sitting, I was sitting in an instruction hut, listening to some instructions about, I don't know what anymore, but Jasper wasn't there anymore. He was called to the officers to go on orders. And not long after that, he actually came to the instruction hut and asked permission to see me. So the instructor asked, but why? So he said, the officer commanding wants to see me. So I got permission and I left. And I said to him, now what's the story? He said, no, that's not actually the story. But when I got to the officer commanding now, he told me that this incident that happened in Oudtshoorn was obviously now counting against him. And they cannot see to make him an officer. So he'll become a lance corporal to eventually become a corporal. So he won't be an officer. He didn't take that well. So he told the officer commanding what to do with the stripe and where to put the stripe and left. And then he told me that whilst he was now walking around in base, not knowing what to do now, he realized that he'll have to go back and recall the stripe, otherwise he's going to become a troop. So he made another appointment, got back to the officer, and profusely asked for forgiveness, and he got his stripe back. But then also, it was also the time when the special units come to infantry school, and you now have to decide where you want to go. Or they select people, or you can go and have a look at, you want to go to Parachute Battalion, or Reconnaissance Command, or Verreder Centrum, or whatever. And 3-2 Battalion was also there, 3-1 Battalion was there. So lots of units that were there. And said to me, I don't have to go. He's already been there, and he's already nominated us to go to 3-2. So I said, well, it's not your decision to decide where I want to go. I mean, I'll make up my own mind. So he said, no. They actually said they needed both of us, because now we're all mortar qualified. I'll become an officer and he'll become an NCO, and then we can join together. And then obviously he's looking forward, way forward on opportunities that will arise now. Eventually, I had to make up my mind, because I was asked to stay at infantry school to become a platoon commander the next year at Bravo Company. And but he sort of orientated me and said, you know, we're going to miss all this drilling, the passing out parade, all that things that's not nice. And we can be out of here by November, beginning of November. Yeah, so that is what happened. So that is how we got into 3-2 Battalion, by chance, I would say, not by my choice. But I decided, okay, it's better than staying in infantry school. Obviously, the guys that do the selection tell you everything that's rosy about the extra money that you're going to get, the bush pay that you're going to get, and how big is your student loan. It was quite big. So you can, all that stuff obviously also helped a little bit with the decision. Yeah, and that's the way that we eventually got to 3-2 Battalion. And that's another whole story that's sort of was in front of us, that we weren't seriously, at that stage, we didn't know what was going on. We just heard a little bit of what 3-2 Battalion was about. Yeah, later on it was quite a rude awakening. But I think that was also the start of one's formative phase, where you start behaving like a grown-up, and where responsibilities become serious, because it's now a situation of life and death. It's not, we're not playing anymore. Yeah, so that's basically where I come from. How did I end up in 3-2 Battalion? So of course, that's basically in short how I got there.
I have to say that was fascinating to me. I can't believe you spoke 41 minutes without stop. And that hardly ever happens on this program. So I'm just sitting here listening. Thank you very much. I have to say, for Namibian, your English is fantastic. Has it always been like that? Or did you learn to speak proper English as you went along?
Well, of course, thank you. I actually still don't think I can speak proper English, but yeah, thank you for that. I think it picked up a little bit in the last few years, but after I left 3-2 Battalion, most of what we spoke actually was Portuguese. And I can speak Afrikaans, English, Portuguese, and German. But after coming out of 3-2 many years later, and when I met my wife, I couldn't speak Afrikaans, English, or German properly, because I used to mix it up with Portuguese words in between. But yeah, so yeah, thank you for the compliment. But
it's amazing to me how many languages you people actually speak. I mean, I was interviewing General Bowman, and he started speaking French to my wife. But then he says he can speak some Mbambo, definitely some Portuguese, German fluently, Afrikaans, English. It's just magic. I recall I lived in Corrigas for a while. My parents were also moving quite a bit, and I was the youngest child. And the older ones went to Oudtshoorn for high school, I suppose. And they had these rugby matches against Oudtshoorn. Now, Oudtshoorn, we consider to be a big-time city. For us, this
Yeah.
place was like New York itself. It had tar roads and robots, traffic lights. It was a very scary place. And there were one hell of a rugby games between these two towns. Now I need to ask you, where is Shumet? Would you rate them above when you guys were not sort of held back by liquor consumption? How good were your rugby teams?
Jumeb was much stronger than Oudtshoorn. It was a much bigger school. I think we were over 1,000 children then. So athletic-wise, rugby, swimming, I think we were probably we were the best school in the north, and one or two schools in Windhoek might be better. But our rugby was, and obviously also Walvis Bay also had a good team, because they also had a good school. But Oudtshoorn wasn't, their high school wasn't as big as Jumeb or Walvis Bay or Windhoek. Yeah, they say they didn't feature in that league, although they were good, but not on that level, I think, if I can remember correctly.
Have you ever felt being you would be discriminated against because you're a Southwester? That they would, where some people do 10 push-ups, you have to do 20. Because Southwest people are quite tough people, let's be honest. They're a different breed.
No, I've actually not. I've always actually found it that people sort of either didn't know about Namibia, or when they did know about Namibians, they knew that they were honest and genuine and down-to-earth people. I think today still, when I do some of my work that I do in the sports community, and also conferences that we've had, and we had one a few years ago, just before this COVID situation. We had a big conference in Windhoek about how to develop tourism and how to better tourism. And there were people from overseas as well, obviously tour agents that came to this conference. And I remember when I had something to say there, they were obviously, the people were thinking about maybe perfecting your service, bettering your service, and how can we stand out above the other countries, because we've got the tourist destination. There's nothing about that. It's true, but we are lacking on service, and we are lacking on this, and we are lacking on that. We're not first world, etc., etc. But I said that day that there's two things that we have in Namibia that I think other countries don't have. And maybe I'm talking about Africa now in the sense of there was a war here, there was a war in South Africa. But in Namibia nowadays, two things that people always realize when they come here, and I'm talking about overseas guests now. The first thing is they find Namibians, and I'm talking about all races now, they find Namibians very friendly. And you must remember now, 90% of the population in Namibia is black. And that's all the people that work in your service departments, etc. So the one thing that we have that's standing out already is that we are friendly. And the second thing that our people are, you don't find the animosity and the hatred here. That is quite true. And that is something that we already, there's two points that we are already way ahead of other countries. I think sometimes our officers at when you come into the country, at when you call them English is, you see, of course now my English is gone.
I think it's immigration.
Immigration officers. I think I've traveled the world quite a bit, and I think I've met very bad type of personalities and bad. Most of the immigration people aren't friendly. And I mean, in Germany, if you go to Germany, it's like if you're being cross-examined sometimes, and America as well, sometimes. But if we can work on our immigration officers, then we've got three things that's in our favor already. The rest of the stuff we can work on. So that's why I think Namibia is different. And if you come to Namibia for the first time, you will lose your heart here and you will go back to Namibia. And that's why we also see a lot of people from South Africa and from other world walks of life wanting to retire here or invest here and stay here. Because, I mean, I live in Swakopmund at the moment. And I remember when I told my wife we're going to Swakopmund, she said, not happening. Or eventually she said, if we ever go to Namibia, I'll go to Swakopmund. Just don't put me in Tsumeb. I don't like the heat. But it's a wonderful town. It's a wonderful place, Namibia, to live in. So I think we are blessed to be here.
My mother-in-law is Swiss, and of course she speaks German as well. And she's been to Namibia about 20 times with those red bosses, those red trucks. I don't know what you call them. You know, they tovers, you sleep in them or something.
Yeah.
Just loves the place. So tell me, how welcome would foreigners be in Namibia? If someone's listening here and you're from Europe, I can tell you now there isn't a better country to go to. I was once, someone said to me, South Africa consists of 55 million angry people. And I'm a South African myself, so, but Namibia is not like that at all. It's a very peaceful place. I think if a murder takes place, it's headline news. Everybody knows about it. It's not common. So it's safe, very, very safe, quite modern. How welcome would overseas people be there to invest?
Well, I can tell you everybody that comes to Namibia will feel welcome. And I think it's a wonderful place to come and have a holiday with, or have a holiday at. And you will experience the love from the people. You will experience wildlife that you've never seen before. It is relatively cheap compared to the rest of the world. Obviously, if you come from Europe or America, it's in your pocket because you've got the exchange rate that's in your favor. But I think we have some of the best lodges in the world here. Some of the best institutions that look after elephants, rhinos, that type of thing, lions. And it's still not big city. You still get that feeling that you're in Africa because the towns are small, the lodges are big. Etosha Game Park is probably the most well known. We also get the Big Five, but around that, a lot of private entrepreneurs have obviously built their own lodges. A lot of big businesses build their own lodges. So there's a lot to do. You have the south, which is a beauty on its own. You have the east and the north. That's a beauty on their own. You've got the coast. So what else can you want? I mean, this is just. And I haven't heard about bad experiences in Namibia from overseas tourists. Obviously, it's also our biggest contingent of tourists come from Europe. So we have a big intake from Germans, Dutch, English, and Italian. Italians are specific season here, specific time of the year when they have holiday in Italy, the people come here. So those are the four big markets. Just recently, just before COVID, we had a big conference in Joburg where we started introducing Namibia to the east, to China, Obviously, Namibia has got a lot of Chinese here, because I think most of some of these mines belong to the Chinese, because they need a specific for their development and power that they need, uranium mines. Then there's also other countries. The Australians and the Americans and the Canadians are also big in the mining facilities here. Yeah, but I think I haven't heard about bad experience. I don't think I've heard many of those. So people are welcome. I mean, and especially now, because my town looked like a ghost town for a year and a half now. Normally we get about 1.98 million people, visitors in a year. And 2020 and 2021, we've had up till about a month or two ago, 175,000 people visiting. So you can imagine what that does to the businesses that gets their most income from tourism. It's time now. People can come. People are prepared. I think during this time, the businesses also prepare themselves better, train themselves better, and they are hungry for visitors, and you'll be carried on your hands.
Well, it seems I'm bringing my mother-in-law as well as my wife December, January, we hope. We're definitely coming, and I would tell anybody listening here, please, you can't go wrong. You can see there's even internet. We've had no problems whatsoever. It's a great country, a great country. Can I ask you, Buttons, I know you're a man who loves sports, you're involved in sports right now. Can you tell us a little bit about it? I see this badge on your shirt, on your shirt. Is that part of your company?
Yes, a few years ago, I actually came to Namibia. A friend of mine has the biggest sport facility, indoor sport facility in the southern hemisphere here in Swakopmund, which him and a partner built. Now it's a sport facility under one roof, the size of maybe a rugby field, and inside this hall there's about 17 sports that can be done. And adjacent to this, or part of this building, is now gymnasium, swimming pool, hotel, conference facility, spa. So it's a one-stop shop for international sport and people that want to come and develop themselves here. And the idea was that they built it for the High Performance Center of Namibia, similar to what you would find at Turkish, for instance, or Stellenbosch University. So I was there. I worked there for 7 years. Was involved in the planning of it and writing the how it's going to function, etc., etc. So eventually I started working for them. I initially consulted with them, started working for them, and became the operations manager in charge of basically the whole facility. And 2 years ago, we started on our own. Some of the guys that worked for me, and we started a company called Connect People to People. And we rented the 4th and the 5th floor of the facility, which is a very big conference facility, second biggest in Namibia. But part of Connect People to People is also, we also put up big events in Namibia, like car shows, music shows, sport shows. And the third leg is team building. And I have an association with the Team Building Institute in South Africa. And we work on thinking preferences, and specifically the Ned Herman brain instrument, where we tell you or teach you or take you through a facilitation that if you understand the way that you think, and you also understand that the way other people think, that it would take away a lot of uncertainties. So you won't be thinking, how can that idiot think like that? So it brings understanding, it brings a way of communication, it brings a way of behavior. So we call it adventure experiential learning. So You take part in the adventure, you experience something, and you learn something out of that experience. And eventually there's behavioral change, and in that way you can develop yourself as a person. So we use this technique with a lot of sport teams where we train them how to think. What's your thinking profile? What can you do right? What can you do wrong? When must you take a chance? What not? And also tell them how to communicate, how to behave as an athlete, and how to become a better person eventually. And we also use the same method with corporate companies, where we do the brain profiles for them, and they can then veer into other areas that they're not so good at. So thinking preference is not the right or wrong thing, it's the way that you are put together, but you can also change your thinking preference towards other area when you veer into that area, to start experiencing how other people think and how they behave and why do they do that. So you know what your blind spots are, and you know what your strong points are. So, and that's basically what we do. Obviously our conferencing and events have been seriously hampered over the last 2 years. We are currently luckily working on one of the events that I have in Namibia, which is called Fittest in the Namib, which is a 2-day fitness competition. And this is now the 3rd year that we're doing this. We have 100 teams. It's a two-person team, male and female, with different divisions. So you get your professionals and your non-professionals, and then also masters. And this year we have, I think, 4 or 5 teams from Germany coming, and then also 6 or 7 teams from South Africa coming. So it's getting well known now, and maybe eventually we working towards hosting it as an African championships as well. Yeah, so that's basically the one side of it. The other side is I also work with a lot with disabled teams, and we've just started with that. I've got an athlete with the name of Gideon Nozelowski. He used to be a Olympian swimmer. Now he's a S3 classification, which is a S1 is the worst and S13 is the least disabled. So he's very high up in disabled. But he's actually a wonderful person. He was sitting watching the Olympics in 2008, and his friends sort of dared him and said they can't see him there doing what. So he said, "But I'm gonna go to the Olympics one day." So he started swimming, and in 2016 he got to the Olympics in Rio. And now we have a project with him in November where he's going to swim from Robben Island to Cape Town. And the aim of this project is to just have people become more aware of disabled people, and that they're also not mentally disabled, they're just disabled. And they also need the rights to be able to work in any environment and give them the opportunities to do that. In Africa, it's still a big problem because people still hide away and they shy away, and they are shy about their children that are disabled. And incidentally, Namibia's disabled team do much better at the Olympics than the able bodies, because they bring the medals back every time. The last time we had a medal in Namibia for able-bodied athlete was Frankie Fredericks, and that's many, many years ago. But every time that our disabled people go overseas and to the Olympics, we bring back medals. So that's basically our other project, and the aim of that project is then to make Gideon a motivational speaker, which he is at the moment as well. He's also he's a general or regional manager for Fruit Lovers Market in the coast. So he's a quite clued up guy. But his story the story about how he got there is a very, very long and long road that it took him to get there. And that's what we want to tell the people, that you must believe in yourself. So he's got a saying, if I can do it, you can do it. And that's what we want to tell people.
Well, if you can give me any links, I will put them in here. And if you can bring Gideon for the next episode, I'll gladly put you two on and we can see what we can do.
Yeah. Yeah. So we are now in our last 4 weeks to preparation. We had a few hiccups. He got COVID and he recovered, but we're on track now. Yeah, so it's just, we got fair amount of sponsoring. We're looking for some stuff still, but yeah, it will be helpful if we can maybe call on somebody to assist us in this venture that we want to do, because we're going to try and swim middle November, God willing, and normally it takes about 1.5 hours to 3.5 hours to swim. That's now for an able-bodied swimmer. But because of him, he's got a range of motion that's not very good. It will take 7 to 8 hours. So our biggest problem would be with hypothermia. But mind-wise and fitness-wise, he's ready. It's just if a doctor says you have to be out of here because you are not, you've got hypothermia, then we can't do anything about it. But if it's up to him and us that'll support him, yeah, we will definitely do this.
Well, I'm looking forward to hear from that.
Yeah, I'll send you some links and you can have a look at how he looks. And he's a very good motivational speaker. He's a very intelligent gentleman. And we've had lots of fun together already, because we also did the Desert Dash, which is a race from Windhoek to Swakopmund, 388 kilometers in a 4-man team, 24 hours race last year. He was in a tricycle and the rest of his team was on bicycles. And we made it 30 minutes before the cutoff. And that was also an enormous challenge. But he did it. And that is what he wants to show. It's not necessarily just to be an athlete, but also just how you must apply yourself to become a functional person in the real life.
Thank you. I have to say, I really enjoyed this conversation. Next week, we're going to go on with 3-2 Battalion. I don't think you people listening here want to miss that. As I always say to you, no one was unimportant. If you have a story to tell us, come and tell us your story. Everyone's welcome. I will leave my link in here once again. And until we meet again, God bless.
Thank you, Chris. Quite enjoyable.